Hey students, we're going to do lesson 1.3b, part 1 today. We'll do part 2 tomorrow. In this lesson, we are going to get familiar with a form of a linear equation called the slope-intercept form. Um, Before we do that, I want to talk about a couple terms here. So I'm at the bottom of page 3, and I just want to fill in a couple things. Uh, that a number that is multiplied by the input is called a coefficient. So fill that in. And a number that stands by itself, like b, is often called the constant term. So what I'm talking about here is, and here's my example. I'll give you an example, and then we'll fill these in. If we write an equation like this, y equals something times x, let's say 3 times x plus 5, then we refer to the 3 as the coefficient and the 5 as the constant term. All right, so the part that you're multiplying by x is the coefficient and the other part is the constant term. Go ahead and fill in these blank spots here to see if you can figure out which is the constant term and which is the coefficient for each of those. And if you pause right now, you can start it back up and see if you're right. So you probably did pretty well on this one. I would say maybe here you didn't put a minus 3, but remember, if it's subtraction, we can think of it as adding a negative, and we're looking for what we're adding as the constant term. So that would be negative 3. And then right here, some people may have put 0 there, but really if you have an x here, then that's the same as 1 times x, because 1 times a number is the same as just the number. All right. So at the bottom of this page, I want you just to write some quick notes here. We're going to talk about an equation written in this form, and it's called the slope-intercept form. And you'll get to know why it's called the slope-intercept form soon. But basically it's just some number times x, remember that's the coefficient, and then some constant term added. And we're going to find out that that's actually the y-intercept, that b part there. All right, so let's skip a couple pages here. We're going to go to the bottom of page 6, and we're going to do this problem here. It says, Darnell and Maya were trying to graph this equation. Right here, y equals 3x minus 1. And Maya says that she can tell from the equation that there will be a point on this equation, 0, negative 1, will be on our graph. And I think the reason she says that is because if you put in to this equation, and I'll just make a table here for some of the values, but if we put in 0 for that equation, and I just do 3 times 0, well, 3 times 0 is 0, and then when I subtract 1, I'm going to get negative 1, because 0 minus 1 is negative 1. So that's how she can tell. And that point is right here on the graph. We call it the y-intercept because it's right on the y-axis. And then we just have to figure out what the slope is. And remember that the slope, if I go up by 1 here, whatever y changes by will be the slope. So I'll do one more point here. If I do 3 times 1 minus 1, I get 3 minus 1, which is 2. And if I do 3 times 2 minus 1, that's 6 minus 1 is 5. And I see that these are going up by 3. Well, check this out. 3 happens to be the number that we're multiplying by x. So that's really the slope. So once I figure out from my equation that the number multiplied by x, the 3, is the slope, and that this negative 1 will be on my y-axis at negative 1, because if I put in 0 for x, this part of the equation is always going to be 0. And then if I subtract 1, I get 1. So knowing that, and I know my slope is 3, I can just go up 3 over 1, put a dot, up 3 over 1, put another dot, and just draw a line through there. It's pretty easy to graph that way. So recognizing those two things is really going to help us here. All right, so let's go to the next page and use what we just found out to help us do this problem. All right, on part A, it says for each graph below, determine the coordinates 0b for the y-intercept. That just means look on the y-axis, find where the line crosses, write down the coordinates for that. There you go. And this one is 0, -8. Do that for each of the graphs. You can pause now and do the other two if you want. Okay, and then down on number 4, for the graphs in exercise 3, determine the slope. So use rise over run. So we're going to go back up here and do the slope. We need to find a couple places where it seems to cross the line. I'm thinking that if you look closely, it seems to be going down 1 for every 1 you go over. So the rise would be -1 over 1. We can simplify that to -1. On the second one here, it looks like it's crossing in those places, which means I'm going up 5 for every 1 I go over. So that's 5 over 1, which is 5. You can pause now and do the other two if you want. And now I'm going to use this form to write my equation. All I need to do is replace this m with the slope, replace this b with the y-intercept. So the slope of the first graph is -1, so I'm going to put -1 where the x is, and the y-intercept was right there, -5, so I'm going to put that where the b is, so plus -5. And I'm just going to simplify this a little, make it look better. -1 times x, and it just multiplying by -1 gives you the same number, so I can just write that as -x. And then instead of plus -5, I'm going to write that as -5, because adding a negative is the same as subtracting. All right, so that's what you do. I'm going to go ahead and let you try and do B, C, and D, and we'll talk about your answers next time we meet in class.